Welcome to the Better German podcast. My name is Susi and I will teach you German and everything around the language, the countries, and the culture. Welcome to the Better German podcast. I'm going to introduce myself just a little bit because the podcast is very new. This is one of the first episodes. I'm a German teacher. I have been teaching German for almost 17 years now. And I have decided that I want to help more people than those students that I have been working with directly so far. So one of the things that I am starting in order to do that is this podcast. So let's jump into this topic or into this episode. I'm going to talk in this episode about why learning German. I've decided that should be one of the first episodes because maybe you're looking at learning German or not. Then I'm going to give you some reasons why you should learn German. I'm more towards the end also going to talk about why not to learn German, or more what is not a good enough reason to learn German, or maybe even how are you not going to learn German. But let's start with the reasons to learn German. Probably most of my students so far learn German because they live in a German-speaking country. If you are living in a German-speaking country and don't speak German, then that's probably the first obvious reason, but it's not that obvious because I'm located in Vienna, Austria, which is one of the three main German-speaking countries, but a smaller one. Austria only has 9 million people, actually. Germany has many more than that. But still, particularly in Vienna, there's actually quite a big English-speaking community that does not necessarily speak German. Most of them, or maybe you're one of them, are working for companies whose customer language is English, and they maybe don't require their employees, or not all of their employees, to speak German. Or, of course, Vienna is a university town. So we have somewhere around 250,000 students. Maybe I'm not 100% correct. This could be a pre-corona number, but I'm pretty sure it's in that area. And not all of them speak German. I'm going to go a little bit later more into that, how that is even possible. However, still, I want to say, living in Austria or planning to live in Austria, particularly if you want to stay here for a longer time, or in Germany, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing, is even if you have a job right now that allows you to work and you do not need German right away, I highly suggest you to learn German for various reasons. First of all, the international community in Austria is quite big, or in Vienna particularly, is quite big, and you maybe have the feeling of never needing to speak German. Maybe there's even a community that speaks another language. That could also be the case, of course. However, I think you will be able to enrich your experience a lot when you speak German. There's a lot of people in Austria that speak English quite good, but still you can communicate to them on a different level, if you speak the language. It could happen, for example, if you go out with friends or if you have a group of friends that speak English, still they could speak German with each other. Maybe they will try to be friendly, but it's still going to be communication on a different level. So I would definitely say if you learn to speak German, it will allow you to communicate with Austrians or other people that live in Austria that speak German natively on a different level. I also think overall Austria is relatively friendly to foreigners, but of course, like anywhere in the world, unfortunately, there are people that are not as happy as other people with people coming from other cultures. And in my experience, this is linked very much to language. And it makes sense because if you can communicate with people in their language, it generally immediately increases how much they like you. So that could be another reason. Austria's main language or official language is German. There is, in theory, exceptions to that in certain areas of the country. There are minority languages, for example, Croatian, that are official languages. But this is only in certain parts, and English is not one of them. When you need or want to deal with anything official, it is always very well advised or much better and much easier for you if you speak German. Of course, there are lawyers and agencies that speak English. But even if you're lucky and you meet a person, an official, that speaks English and whose English is good enough, and who's willing to talk to you in English, it could get them into trouble because all of the legal text, like the laws and stuff like that, are in German. So if they advise you in English and they tell you something wrong because of their English not being perfect, then they're possibly going to get in trouble. Anyway, if you're lucky, you will find somebody that will help you and whose English is good enough. But you're much more independent and it's much easier for you if you actually speak the language and if you speak German. Another reason to learn German, obviously, is if you want to travel. And if maybe you don't even live in Austria or in a German-speaking country and you don't have any plans to, but you want to visit these areas, literally all German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Luxembourg, have beautiful scenery, beautiful landscape, beautiful cities. So they're definitely worth visiting. And just a little bit of German or an intermediate level of German will get you a long way. However, I'm telling you, particularly when you're in the countryside, we have quite a lot of dialects, German dialects, and they are challenging. But still, learning some German will help you a lot if you are traveling and if you like these areas. If you like cities, if you like city hopping, or if you like maybe hiking, then that could be a very interesting thing. Or skiing. Skiing in Austria is a great thing. Even though in very touristy areas, people will speak English very well, most likely. However, if you speak German, this can open a whole new range of places you can go that you probably wouldn't go if English was the only language you were speaking. What else do we have? I think you will never get the real flavor of these places if you don't understand any German. But I think we've covered that already. If you are in Austria, let's say maybe you have a job, and even if you don't need to speak German for your current job, I highly advise you to learn German anyway. I have seen this in students or people that I've met or read about in forums and groups that came here on jobs where they didn't have to learn German, but then at some point decided to change their job or wanted to change their jobs or were unlucky and lost their jobs. And then it was maybe more challenging to find a new job when you don't speak German. Or let's put it the other way. You have a bigger possibility of jobs you can get, even if you have already been in Austria and have work experience here, if your German is good. For working in Austria, obviously your German should be actually very good. If you are very good in German, it even opens a whole new range of jobs that you couldn't get otherwise. Jobs where you specifically need to be bilingual. For example, to work or have a job in a company, an Austrian company, that makes business with English-speaking countries, for example. There is another very specific reason why you could learn German if you want to study in Austria. As I mentioned before, Austria is a university city. We have about 250,000 students. The student fees, even for foreign students, are relatively low compared to many other countries. And if you want to start with the bachelor, there is hardly any bachelor studies that are offered only in English. If you want to study a bachelor, it's a good idea to learn German, and it's a good idea to start learning German way earlier than that. Because in order to study at the university, you need a very high level, specifically a C1 level. That's a very high level of language skill. There is another episode coming up, one of the next episodes, that is explaining the different levels of language certificates that exist. That's not only for German, but I'm doing this particularly about German, just so you're not in a total mystery in case you've never heard that before. A1 is the easiest level. It's the first level you would get when you start learning a language, and it would be the equivalent of being able to speak in very short sentences about your immediate environment. And it goes A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And C2 is the highest level. That would be basically equivalent to a well-educated native speaker. So anyway, if you want to study in Austria and you want to study a bachelor, it's among other things that you need to apply for. It's mandatory that you have a C1 certificate. You usually can't even do that in Austria. However, as I said, it's not a walk in the park. It's quite a lot of learning that needs to go into that. However, if you then have it, obviously you have a great experience because you studied in a different country and you learned an additional language on top of whatever else you study. Maybe you already did a bachelor and you want to do a master. There are quite a lot of master degrees in Austria you can do where you actually technically do not have to speak German because they're delivered in English. However, in that case, that is an entirely different reason why you should learn German. I highly recommend it. If you would do that and you came here, the master degree usually takes 2 years, that you immediately also start learning German. If you just stay here and then you want to go back to your country and you're not interested in learning German, okay, fine. But if you are interested in staying in Austria or another German-speaking area, again, the likeliness of getting a job is much higher if you speak German. Yeah, I think the number one reason that I see, this is not an official poll, but the number one reason that I see, the reason that people give why they're having trouble finding a job in Austria, if they're looking for one and they're English speaking, or maybe English as a second language speaking and not German speaking, is the fact that they're not speaking German. So if we look at that from a more positive point of view, when you learn German or when you speak German, your chances are extremely higher. And then I want to mention an obvious thing, and that's starting us into the point of what's not a good reason to learn German, is this may sound interesting at this point in time, but if you want to get certain visas in Austria, you also need to have or show certain levels of German. For example, if someone marries an Austrian and he's not a European Union member, then he needs to get first an A1 and then an A2 exam, meaning a certain level of German exam. And if you want to get the citizenship, in many cases, you also need to prove your German level. That being said, I want to say something that I have experienced a lot. There is many learners of German that I have met or communicated with or I've read their questions that are very interested in passing certain German exams. And this is understandable, particularly because sometimes, as I said, it's mandatory. However, I highly advise all of my students not to learn to pass an exam. Because what happens, I've seen it many times, and I have students that did learn to pass the exam, whichever exam it was, and they passed the exam, and then they don't know German. And I think that's very sad because they put work into it. And maybe you've experienced that from your own school time, or maybe you have even had the same thing that you learned and for an A1 or A2 or whatever German, a certain German level exam. And you learned and maybe you worked hard and then you were disappointed. Maybe you passed. I hope that you passed your exam, but still, maybe there was even a point where you had experienced some disappointment because you weren't actually able to speak German after that or communicate in German. So I advise you or suggest to you to maybe look at the different approach when you learn, even if you have to do an exam. Don't ever ask the question when you learn a certain thing, okay, is this gonna come to the exam? How am I remembering this for the exam? But take another approach. Take the approach of how can I apply this? How can I use this? Is this something I'm gonna be able to use to communicate with someone? Very important, I think, for you in order to do that is for you to have some reason or motivation why you want to learn German, whatever that is. I gave you some very general possibilities, but maybe you have more personal ones, whatever it is for you, why you want to learn German. This could be, I've always wanted to visit Vienna, and when I visit Vienna, I want to have the full experience and be able to talk to everyone. Or maybe there is a girl or a guy that you like, and you would like to talk to them in German, or you want to get a good job. But in any way, keep in mind, German is a language, obviously. And whenever you learn German, look at the thing. Is this going to help me? Or how can this help me in achieving this purpose that I want to communicate with people in this language? And never to just learn for an exam. Even if you have to pass an exam, we've probably all been there. I've also been in the situation when I had to pass a certain test. But still, I was trying to always keep my own learning discipline in, to not just try to learn things verbatim for the test or learn things to pass a test, but really always look at, okay, good, how am I going to apply this? This looks as if it maybe takes longer to do that. But on the other hand, hey, when you're already spending time to learn, you might as well actually learn. Learn in the sense of get something out of it and achieve something. In closing, I invite you to, first of all, when you attempt or start to learn German, really for yourself define what is your purpose. Why do you want to learn it? This is probably true for anything, not just German, for any language, for anything you learn. But particularly when you want to learn German, never just learn for an exam. And let me know how you're doing with this. Let me know, is this a point for you? Are you lacking motivation? It could be that maybe you tried to learn and you had your motivation fully in place, and then you hit a wall. So if that's the case, I'd be very happy if you subscribe to this podcast. Stay tuned with me I'm going to go into exactly those things as well. What could have kept you from learning? But this is a point to start with, and let me know if there is something you can do with this. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can find a transcript of this episode at bettergerman.info and then the number of the episode. You can also sign up for a newsletter there, and then you will be informed when there is a new episode coming or any other important events going on, new articles, new freebies, or things like that. If you liked it and it was helpful for you, please share it with other people and let them know that this exists. And if you are looking for a course and you want to learn German online, then you can, of course, find all the infos as well on bettergerman.info. So, see you there and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.